Hello everyone, this is Bob and Threadbare, and welcome back to Threadbare Reviews. So like I said last time, I'm currently working my way through a bunch of Bobbin's Choice options, and this time I've decided to use patron A Great Divorce's request to cover a book in the Witcher series. In this case, it's Blood of Elves, the third book in the chronology, but the first proper novel. It was first published by Sapkowski in 1994, and it was first translated to English in 2008. In fact, it was translated 7 years before they got around to the second short story collection. So when I first read the book, I had no idea what was going on or what had happened between Geralt, Yennefer, and Ciri. But if you've been watching these videos in chronological order, you should have no trouble with that, so let's move on. The review. Around a year has passed since Geralt and Ciri reunited, and Geralt has taken her to the home of the Witchers, Kaer Morhen. Kaer Morhen used to be a bustling community, but then its greedy neighbors whipped up some anti-Witcher propaganda and used it to justify an assault on their keep. All the Witchers who were there at the time died, but those who were out sometimes returned to the ruins and used them as a base or talk shop with the other Witchers. They include Geralt, Lambert, Eskel, Cohen, and Vesemir, who is now the ranking Witcher, despite only being a sword instructor. As for why the Witchers haven't rebuilt, it's mostly because none of the survivors have the heart to start torturing and killing children to turn them into new Witchers. Ciri is an exception, because she is a child surprise, and she doesn't need any mutations to become a good Witcher. In fact, she takes very naturally to the training, and learns just about everything they have to teach her, with the exception being Witcher signs. Because of that, and because of her prophetic nightmares, Geralt invites Triss Merigold to the stronghold. Triss was thought dead at the Battle of Sodden, but was only badly wounded and scarred. She also seduced Geralt using magic during one of his off-again moments with Yennefer, just so she could see why her friend kept coming back to him. But then she ended up falling in love with him and obsessing over him. Ultimately, she helps Ciri with her nightmares, and she helps the Witchers understand how the needs of a young girl are different than the needs of a young boy. But she can't help Ciri learn how to use magic. Meanwhile, there's something of a Cold War going on between the Redanian Secret Service of the North and the Nilfgaardian spies of the South. Dandelion the Bard is currently working with the Redanians, in particular with a mountain of a man named Dijkstra. As for the Nilfgaardians, their chief spy appears to be a wizard named Reince, and he captures Dandelion but is forced to flee when Yennefer shows up and hits his face with a fire spell. Both sides are looking for Ciri, because, as the last surviving royal of Cintra, they can use her to either justify an attack or secure their occupation. And aside from her royal blood, people also want her because she's a source, a powerful font of magic who inherited a rare gene from a distant elven ancestor. Hence the title, Blood of Elves. Also, meanwhile, the sovereigns in the north are meeting in secret to coordinate their response to Nilfgaardian aggression and economic dominance. They fully expect Nilfgaard to attack again once they finish licking their wounds, so they decide that their best option would be to attack Nilfgaard right away, while they're still weak. They also mention that Nilfgaard has been funding a non-human guerrilla force called the Scoia'tael, or Squirrels. And while they admit that the Scoia'tael only exist because of the growing persecution of non-humans in the north, they have no desire to address these underlying issues, and only plan on crushing the Squirrels as a pretense for war with the Empire. Later on, Geralt, Triss, and Ciri ride south out of Kaer Morhen to meet up with Yennefer, who has reluctantly agreed to teach Ciri magic after learning that she was the second sorceress Geralt thought to ask. Along the way, Triss comes down with dysentery, and since she's allergic to potions, the group has to find help with a caravan led by Yarpen Zigran, the dwarf who befriended Geralt during the dragon hunt. Yarpen is working with the northern governments, despite the persecution and the rise of the Scoia'tael, and he defends the caravan against a Scoia'tael attack. But then it turns out that the gold he thought he was delivering for King Henselt was just a bunch of rocks. While Yarpen may have trusted King Henselt didn't trust Yarpen. After the attack, Geralt splits off and heads to Oxenfurt, both to confront the spies who are looking for him to get to Ciri, and so he can avoid meeting Yennefer in person. With the help of Dandelion, a young medical student named Shawnee, and the Redanian court wizard Philippa Eilhart, he baits Reince into the open, kills his hired goons, but when Philippa intervenes, he only manages to wound Reince before his master teleports him away. Finally, we see Yennefer teach Ciri magic at the Temple of Melitele, Geralt recovered during the Voice of Reason interludes of the first short story collection. Yennefer doesn't like Ciri at first, since she's just one more woman in Geralt's life, but she grows to like the girl over time, and at one point accidentally calls her daughter. But Ciri gives her a hug afterwards, and starts treating Yennefer as a surrogate mother. And as they leave the temple to go find Geralt, the book ends. The analysis. You can really tell from this book that Sapkowski isn't very comfortable with the length and format of a novel. Instead of being one long continuous story, Blood of Elves is really a series of short but interconnected stories that eventually reaches a novel's word count. The novel is divided into chapters, but it's also divided into episodes. Kaer Morhen, the Royal Summit, the Caravan, the Oxenford Attack, the Temple of Melitele. Each section has its own rising and falling action, and none of them build to one unifying climax. Instead, it continues to set things up for future books, much like the last two stories of the Sword of Destiny. Now, that's not necessarily a criticism. Blood of Elves is part of a 7-book series, after all, and it's clear that Sapkowski conceived of it as such, instead of writing one independent book and then writing a series of sequels. So when you look at the book as part of that larger whole, you can see how it's slowly building things up and getting people to where they need to be for bigger events in the future. But if you take the book in isolation, it's rather unsatisfying, and has pretty much no payoff for anything that it introduces. And I do think this could have been handled better. The book Game of Thrones is also part of a much bigger story, and was always planned to be part of a much bigger story. But it still has a single primary storyline, and the climax of that storyline overshadows and changes all of the side stories that are happening in parallel. Something else I have mixed feelings about is the way Sapkowski handles some of the scenes. When Ciri is training with Geralt or Yennefer, specifically in moments that a film or a show would cover with a montage, Sapkowski drops all descriptions from his writing and only presents the dialogue. We still get an idea of what's happening based on what each person says and how they react to what's going on, but the only thing that's written down is what's spoken out loud. Then in between these sections, we get a general description on what Ciri is learning and how well she's progressing. I've never really encountered this method of storytelling before, and so I'm not really sure what to make of it. It certainly adds more showing to a section that would otherwise be nothing but telling, but to be honest, I would have preferred even more showing than what we get. I understand that cutting out the descriptions is a way to hurry the training sections along, but novels are a very decompressed story format. You don't need to hurry things along because your readers expect you to take your time. So maybe this is one more artifact of Sapkowski being more at home writing short stories instead of novels. But will we become more used to writing novels as we get deeper into the series? I suppose we'll find out. Thanks for joining me again for today's Threadbare review, and I hope I'll see you next time. Until then, please remember to like, share, and subscribe, and if you have a little extra money to spare, you can support me on Patreon. Link in the description.